Hello, Tom Maguire Total Coaching. Please follow me on Instagram and on Facebook for all your coaching and personal development. I'm going to review Willpower Doesn't Work now by Johann Hari, and this is one that I've been meaning to read for a little while. My sister recommended this to me a little while ago, and yeah, it's a good book. So he is basically talking about why this approach that we've had for years and years, this kind of, I don't know, tough approach to things, to giving things up and trying things and saying that we need to use willpower. And he's arguing that obviously willpower doesn't work. So it's clues in the title. But, you know, there's a lot of good stuff in here. We all know, well, if you've been into personal development for a little while, you will know that willpower is something, it's a bit like a muscle. It's something that you can exercise and kind of build to a certain extent, but like muscles, there's only a limit to what you can do, and muscles need rest and recovery. So there's only so far you can push it, basically, before you need to stop and start again. And that is his argument as to why willpower just doesn't work and we need to try something else. If you're someone who's tried to give something up, like sugar or alcohol or smoking or whatever, you might get to a certain distance by using willpower, but you're only going to get so far, and you're going to get to a point where you're just kind of keen to do it again, and you just give up and you've just had enough and you just find a reason to get back on it again. If you have a problem with addiction, I've done another review actually, Alan Carr's Easy Way to Control Alcohol. Yeah, there we go. I hadn't thought about that one before I did this review. So yeah, I've reviewed that, and that's a really good book for if you're drinking, and he does a smoking version as well. So just as an aside, those are really good books. Alan Carr's Easy Way program is really good. But anyway, so yeah, we use willpower, we run out of it, it doesn't work. So what you need to do is try and change your psychology, basically. Try and change the way you look at things. And I've done that for things before. I've managed to massively reduce my alcohol intake by doing that. And it really does work. So what Johann Hari talks about to begin with, he talks about changing your environment. And there's a lot of research to suggest that when we're in the same environment and we've got the same kind of things going on that are kind of prompting us to do different things, we get into routines, and it's just very easy to fall into things. If you know that you've got biscuits in a biscuit tin in the kitchen, you're going to hear them calling. You're far more likely to go and grab one than if they're not there at all. So he says, you know, change your environment, move things around. Don't keep alcohol in the fridge if you want to give up alcohol, because it just makes it too easy to go and get it. It sounds really obvious, but it's just about changing your environment and just making things a bit more difficult, you know, for you to fulfill that kind of addiction, I suppose. But it isn't all just about addiction and breaking habits. It's also, there's loads of personal development stuff in there that's really good. He talks about the time when Nixon was bringing back the soldiers from Vietnam as well, and how they were addicted to heroin out there. And he brought them back, and they discovered that actually a large percentage of them weren't addicted when they got back. And so it was this really weird, people find it really difficult to accept that, you know, this really powerful drug like heroin, that they could kick it when they got home somehow. And the idea was that actually they were addicted over there in Vietnam, in that environment of kind of fear and, you know, not being around the people that they loved and things. But when they got back to America, around the people, you know, the place that they recognised, they felt comfortable, they had their family and friends around, most of them, suddenly they weren't addicted anymore, they didn't need it. So if you look up Johann Hari on YouTube, he's done some TED Talks around, I can't remember what it's called. He wrote a book called Lost Connections, which I think I've reviewed. If I haven't, I will do at some point. But he basically talks about addiction and how it's more to do with not having proper connections, proper genuine, meaningful relationships with people. And when people don't have meaningful relationships, they're far more likely to fall into addiction. So that's really good. And Johann Hari talks about that, sort of references that. So that was a really interesting one. Rat Park, we've probably heard, I've heard of this one before. A lot of you guys, if you're into personal development, will have heard of this one. It gets used quite a lot in personal development books. So this experiment that was done on rats, they were given, was it cocaine or heroin or something in their water, and nothing to do, I think. And they basically kept going back and drinking. They had a choice, water and spiked water. They kept going back to the spiked water. And then in the end, they made the park really interesting for them with different rats that they could play with and mate with, and, you know, made it much more fun for them, basically. And suddenly then they weren't interested in the drugged water. So that was a really interesting experiment. You can look that one up as well. He talks about setting your standards really high, so setting your own standards really high, so holding yourself to account, he says that high performance people kind of hold themselves to account very publicly. They link in with other people, they get mentors who are there to kind of hold them to account a little bit more. He talks about setting up your week so that you'll, just for example, you'll agree to run at least 30 miles a week, you'll agree to write at least 1,000 words a day, or whatever it is you're trying to do. You will set yourself up, you'll put a certain amount of pressure on yourself to hit those minimum standards every day and every week. He goes into much more detail, but that's enough for the review. Growth mindset, which is something Carol Dweck talks a lot about in her book. He talks a lot about that. He talks about the point of no return, which I found really interesting as well. So where you've got to the stage in your sort of development and your success, the thing that you're going after, where you feel as though you're at a point of no return. You've pushed so hard, you've got yourself into such a kind of routine that in your head you've almost changed your psychology. You've got to a point where you can't stop doing it. You feel as though you've kind of invested so much time, maybe so much money potentially, that you just can't stop it. You've got that momentum and you're going like a train, which I really like that one. He talks about the danger of positive psychology, which is something that's been going around for years, where people talk about this need to be feeling good all the time and energized and all the rest of it. And if you're not, then there's kind of something wrong with you. Well, it's just an absolute load of rubbish. We know now that actually negative emotions and the dark side of our personality and stuff can all be really useful. We have to just use them in the right way. We have to accept some of the negative emotions. If you fall into the trap of thinking that you have to be happy all the time, then you're going to end up failing in a big way, because actually we know really from personal development that from the books that we read, from decent psychologists such as Benjamin Hardy, such as Jordan Peterson, we know that if you just try to be happy, it's completely unrealistic. It's not realistic. You need to find your purpose, your meaning in life, and there will be ups and downs, and you can learn from the downs, and you enjoy the ups, but you don't get too comfortable in them. So that positive psychology thing is something that was fashionable for a while, but we need to get away from that, and that's really important. He mentions Jack Canfield, who's really significant as well in this field, and he talks about how everything that you want is on the other side of fear. I really like that. The more I get down my sort of personal development journey and the things that I want to do, the more I set my goals, the more I realise that it is actually fear that gets in your way. You're scared of how people will perceive you. You worry about what people might say, and the more you can get over that and just crack on with it, the better, because at the end of the day, people are entitled to their opinions, and like Anthony Hopkins says, it's no business of mine what people think of me, basically. It's like, what did he say? He's learned to accept everything and expect nothing. And it just feels, life's just easier that way. And so it doesn't matter what people think. They're entitled to their opinion. They'll always have their opinion. As Wayne Dyer says, by allowing people to have that power over you, you're effectively saying that their opinion of you is more important than your opinion of yourself. And that's just not something that you want to do at all. So you need to get over that. So most people aren't willing to put up with feeling a certain way on their way to success. Yeah, he says that most people aren't prepared to put up with those kind of feelings of fear and apprehension and worry on their way to success. They're just not prepared to get their teeth stuck into that and get on a bit. They'd rather just say, oh, you know what? I might be successful, I did that, but actually it's too uncomfortable, so I'm just going to stay as I am and I'll just keep plodding away and just play the safe game. And actually, you never achieve your potential that way. You have to do stuff that makes you feel uncomfortable. You have to do those difficult things. You have to risk failing, and if you do fail, you have to learn from it and carry on. Successful people, he says, look at opportunities. They look for opportunities to ramp up the pressure on themselves, to do things, put themselves out there. If you're a public speaker, you might try and find some event that really, is bigger than you've ever done before, that really scares you and moves you on. So you never get comfortable. They say that, what is it they say? I'm going to get this quote wrong now. Failure comes with success, basically. There's a better way of putting it, but yeah, when you become successful, then suddenly failure is almost inevitable, because you're likely to get comfortable then and think, I'm successful now, brilliant, I've made it. Relax, get fat, take your eye off the ball, and in business in particular, that's really dangerous. So successful people keep pushing themselves all the time. The journey never really ends, and if you see that as a bad thing, then you know, you kind of need to get over, you kind of need to understand why that isn't a bad thing, why that's actually a good thing. I would say that's one of the first things you need to do on your personal development journey, really, if you want to be successful, is to accept that the journey is going to be ongoing. There's no end point where you just lie on the beach for the rest of your time. And if you think that's what you're after, then you need to kind of realise, actually, lying on a beach is great, but after a while it's going to get pretty boring. So yeah, you've got to have that balance. One of the last things he said that I found quite interesting is he talked about people who listen to songs on repeat when they're trying to concentrate, when they're trying to do their work. This idea that you just listen to the same song and it gets you in a flow state. And flow state is something I'm really interested in at the minute. That's something I'm trying to do with my work, because I find that when I'm thinking about lots of different things, it's so easy to be put off. I've got 2 young kids as well, and they need things at times. And yeah, it's very difficult to get into a flow state at times. So cool, but this is a really good book. Benjamin Hardy, Willpower Doesn't Work. Really good.